Yes, that skull-crowned gun. A revolver wrapped in iron that looks like it spent a night inside a volcano is real. But the main thing we need to ask is, why? Why would someone carry something this savage into the American frontier? In a land ruled by 6 shooters and survival, one weapon broke every rule. It wasn't made for duels. It was made to terrify, to humiliate, to send a message. Some said it belonged to a bounty hunter who carved names into bone. Others say it was cursed, a gun that demanded blood every time it was drawn. Today, we're uncovering the 11 most brutal weapons ever carried by legendary cowboys. These weren't just tools. They were instruments of survival and symbols of dominance. From skull crushers to soul stealers, we're diving into the real killing machines that ruled the frontier. What made a man choose this over a Colt 45? Stick around. The answer might disturb you. Number 11, the Chainfire Catastrophe Pepper Box. Let's start with what looked like an innocent pocket revolver, but was actually a ticking time bomb waiting to destroy its owner. The Chainfire Pepper Box earned its cursed reputation through one of the most terrifying malfunctions possible: spontaneous multiple barrel discharge. Picture this deadly contraption: 6 barrels, clustered together like a metal flower of death, each loaded with black powder and a lead ball. Sounds manageable, right? Wrong. The Pepper Box's fatal flaw was its tendency to chain fire. When you pulled the trigger to fire one barrel, the flash and sparks would ignite the powder in neighboring barrels, causing all 6 to explode simultaneously. You're sitting at a poker table in a smoky saloon, cards in one hand, when the dispute turns deadly. You reach for your pepper box, confident in its 6-barrel firepower. You pull the trigger, and suddenly your world explodes. All 6 barrels fire at once, the weapon shattering in your grip as metal fragments tear into your palm. You watch in horror as the uncontrolled blast kills the man next to you, sets the curtains on fire, and turns you into a living torch. The most cursed aspect? The chain fire wasn't a rare malfunction. It happened regularly. Gunsmiths tried to prevent it by coating chambers with wax and grease, but moisture, dirt, or simple wear would break down these barriers. Cowboys who carried Chainfire Pepper Boxes lived in constant fear that their own weapon would be the instrument of their destruction. But here's what made it truly cursed. The Pepper Box was cheap and widely available, meaning countless frontier settlers unknowingly carried these bombs in their pockets. Town records from places like Tombstone and Deadwood are filled with reports of mysterious explosions that turned out to be pepper box chain fires. And if you think that's disturbing, wait until you discover the weapon that was literally designed to kill its user. Number 10, the Suicide Special, Death in Disguise. The name alone should have been warning enough, but the Suicide Special earned its cursed moniker through a combination of shoddy construction and materials so poor that using the weapon was essentially Russian roulette with every shot. These weren't official names. Suicide Special was what frontier doctors and undertakers called the flood of cheap, poorly made revolvers that flooded the West in the 1870s and 1880s. Manufactured by fly-by-night companies using the cheapest possible materials, these weapons were death traps disguised as self-defense tools. Picture a revolver that looked normal from the outside, standard grip, cylinder, barrel, but was made from pot metal so soft you could scratch it with your fingernail. The cylinders were cast from recycled scrap metal that contained air bubbles and weak spots. The barrels were barely thick enough to contain a standard charge of gunpowder. You're a desperate farmer who spent your last few dollars on what looks like salvation, a working revolver for protection. You face down claim jumpers threatening your family. Draw your weapon with confidence and pull the trigger. Instead of stopping your enemies, you watch your revolver explode in your hand. The cylinder fragments blow off 3 of your fingers. Hot gas sears your face, and you realize with horror that your protection has just crippled you while your enemies stand unharmed, laughing at your smoking, mangled hand. What made these weapons truly cursed wasn't just their deadly flaws. It was how they preyed on the desperate. Poor farmers, struggling miners, and down-on-their-luck drifters couldn't afford quality weapons, so they bought these death traps for a fraction of the cost of a real Colt or Smith & Wesson. They thought they were getting protection, but they were actually buying their own execution device. But even the Suicide Special seems tame compared to our next cursed creation, a weapon that could literally blow up an entire building. Number 9. The Powder Keg Carbine, the Building Destroyer. Imagine a rifle so dangerously over-engineered that firing it could bring down the building you were standing in. The Powder Keg Carbine was the result of one inventor's obsession with creating the most powerful portable weapon possible, and his complete disregard for the safety of anyone who might use it. This cursed weapon looked like a normal carbine rifle, but hidden within its wooden stock was a massive powder chamber that held not the usual 30 to 40 grains of black powder, but a terrifying 200 to 300 grains. Enough explosive force to blast through stone walls or demolish wooden structures. The inventor's twisted logic was that frontier settlers needed a weapon that could stop charging buffalo, break through barricades, or demolish obstacles. What he created was essentially a handheld cannon that could kill its user and everyone within a 50-foot radius. You're facing down claim jumpers who want your land, and you decide to show them your secret weapon, the Powder Keg Carbine. You shoulder the rifle, aim at the leader, and pull the trigger. The explosion doesn't just fire the bullet, it destroys everything around you. You feel your shoulder dislocate from the monstrous recoil as you're thrown backwards through your own cabin wall. The 6-foot flame from the barrel ignites your roof, your clothes, and everything else in sight. As you lie broken and burning, you realize your super weapon has just demolished your own home while barely scratching your enemies. The muzzle blast alone was deadly. Anyone standing within 10 feet of the shooter when the weapon fired would be knocked unconscious by the concussion. The flame that shot from the barrel was over 6 feet long and hot enough to ignite clothing, hair, or anything combustible nearby. But here's the most cursed aspect. The weapon was impossible to aim accurately because the recoil was so violent it would dislocate the shooter's shoulder and often knock them unconscious. So you had a weapon with enough power to level a building, but you couldn't control where that devastating force was directed. And this weapon of mass destruction leads us to something even more sinister, a revolver that could kill you just by loading it. If you're already gripped by these hidden weapons of the West, take a second to hit that like button. It helps more folks discover these brutal stories. And if you're new around here, go ahead and subscribe. We've got so many more forgotten weapons and outlaw secrets coming your way, and you won't want to miss what's next. Number 8, the Mercury bullet revolver. Poison in your pocket. This cursed weapon took the concept of deadly ammunition to a horrifying new level. The Mercury bullet revolver used specially designed bullets filled with liquid mercury, a poison so deadly that just touching it could kill you slowly and painfully. The twisted inventor believed that mercury bullets would be more lethal than lead, spreading poison through the victim's body, even if the wound wasn't immediately fatal. What he created was a weapon that was more dangerous to own than to face in a gunfight, You're preparing for what might be your final gunfight, and you decide to load your Mercury bullet revolver with its deadliest ammunition. Your hands shake as you handle the glass vials. One slip, one tiny crack, and you'll poison yourself before the fight even begins. You manage to load the Mercury bullets, but as you holster the weapon, you feel something wet on your fingers. You look down and see silver droplets on your skin. The mercury is leaking. You've just condemned yourself to a slow, agonizing death, and the fight hasn't even started. Over the next few days, you'll begin to hallucinate. Your hands will shake uncontrollably, and you'll slowly lose your mind as the poison destroys your brain. The bullets themselves were nightmarish, hollow lead shells filled with mercury and sealed with wax. But here's where the curse became truly deadly. The wax seals were unreliable. Mercury would leak out inside the cylinder, coating the weapon's internal mechanisms with liquid death. Every time the shooter handled the revolver, they were exposing themselves to a fatal dose of poison. Even worse, the mercury bullets were incredibly unstable. The slightest impact could crack the shell and release the poison. Cowboys who carried these cursed weapons would find mercury stains on their clothing, in their holsters, and on their hands, never realizing they were slowly poisoning themselves to death. But the inventors weren't done with their cursed creations. Wait until you hear about the weapon that could literally set its user on fire. Number 7. The Flame Burst Shotgun, the Human Torch Maker. Imagine a shotgun designed to shoot not just bullets, but actual flames. A weapon so cursed that using it was like strapping a dragon's mouth to your shoulder and hoping it wouldn't turn around and incinerate you. The Flame Burst Shotgun was the brainchild of an inventor who thought the problem with regular shotguns was that they weren't terrifying enough. His solution was to create special shells filled with a mixture of gunpowder, phosphorus, and flammable oils that would explode on impact and set everything in the vicinity on fire. Picture this weapon of destruction. It looked like a normal double-barrel shotgun, but the shells were 3 times larger than standard ammunition and filled with what was essentially liquid fire. When fired, the weapon would shoot not just pellets, but a spreading cloud of flame that could ignite an area the size of a small room. The cursed reality was that the weapon was almost impossible to use safely. The flame shells were so unstable that a hard bump could cause them to explode while still in the gun. The phosphorus mixture would eat through the shell casings over time, leaking flammable chemicals throughout the weapon. And if moisture got into the shells, they could explode with the force of dynamite. But here's what made it truly cursed. The weapon had a fatal design flaw. The intense heat from the flame shells would warp the barrel after just a few shots, causing the next shell to get stuck. When the shooter tried to fire the stuck shell, the weapon would explode like a bomb, covering the user in burning phosphorus and flammable oil. You're trying to clear brush from your property with your innovative flame burst shotgun. You load the first flame shell, aim at a pile of dead branches, and fire. A spreading cloud of liquid fire engulfs the brush pile perfectly. Confident now, you load the second shell and fire again. Another success. But when you load the third shell, you notice the barrel feels unusually hot. You pull the trigger anyway, and your world becomes fire and agony. The warped barrel causes the shell to explode inside the weapon, covering you in burning phosphorus that water cannot extinguish. You scream as the flames eat through your flesh, and you watch your entire homestead catch fire from the explosion. You've become a human torch, and there's nothing anyone can do to save you. And speaking of weapons that consumed their users, our next cursed creation was even more diabolical. Number 6, the Soulstealer Pepperbox, the sanity destroyer. This wasn't just a weapon, it was psychological warfare turned against its own user. The Soulstealer Pepperbox was designed with a mechanism so evil, so psychologically destructive, that it slowly drove its owners insane. The weapon looked like a standard pepperbox revolver, but hidden within its mechanism was a tiny music box that would play a haunting melody every time the weapon was fired. The inventor believed this would intimidate enemies, but he created something far more sinister, a weapon that would haunt its users' dreams. You've just won a duel using your Soulstealer Pepperbox. But as your opponent falls, you hear it, that innocent children's lullaby, tinkling from your weapon. At first you think it's clever, maybe even charming. But that night, lying in your bedroll, you hear it again. The same 30-second melody, playing over and over in your head. You try to sleep, but every time you close your eyes, you see your opponent's face and hear that cursed lullaby. Days pass, then weeks, and the melody never stops. You hear it in the wind, in conversations, in the sound of your own heartbeat. You begin to associate that innocent tune with death, with violence, with the faces of everyone you've killed. Soon you can't tell the difference between the melody in your head and reality. You're trapped in an endless loop of musical torture, and the only way to make it stop is to never use your weapon again. But in the Wild West, that means certain death. But here's where the curse takes hold. The human brain cannot process this contradiction between innocent music and deadly violence. Users of the Soulstealer Pepperbox would begin to associate the lullaby with death and violence. Soon, they would hear the melody in their sleep, during quiet moments, even when the weapon wasn't present. The psychological torture was methodical and devastating. The melody would trigger flashbacks to every person the shooter had killed. The innocent lullaby became a soundtrack of guilt and horror that played constantly in the user's mind. Within months, most Soulstealer owners would be found muttering to themselves, hearing music that wasn't there, reliving their killings over and over. The most cursed aspect was that the mechanism couldn't be removed without destroying the weapon. The music box was integrated into the firing mechanism. To stop the music, you had to stop using the gun entirely. But in the violent Wild West, giving up your weapon meant death. So users were trapped in an endless cycle of psychological torture. But even psychological torture pales compared to our next weapon, which was literally powered by human blood. Number 5. The Blood Price Rifle. The vampire's weapon. The most literally cursed weapon on our list, the Blood Price Rifle required its user to feed it blood, their own blood, before each shot. This wasn't superstition or ritual. It was a mechanical necessity built into the weapon's twisted design. The inventor was a man obsessed with the idea that weapons should extract a price from their users, that taking a life should cost the shooter something precious. His solution was to create a rifle with a hollow chamber that had to be filled with exactly 1 ounce of human blood before the firing mechanism would engage. You're facing 3 armed men, and your blood price rifle is your only hope. You press your hand against the needle mechanism, wincing as it draws 1 ounce of your blood into the reservoir. The weapon clicks, ready to fire. You drop the first attacker, but now you need another shot. You press the needle deeper, drawing more blood, and fire again. By the 3rd shot, you're getting dizzy from blood loss, but you need to keep fighting. You realize with growing horror that each shot requires more blood than the last. What started as a pinprick now feels like a stab wound. You're literally bleeding yourself to death to keep your weapon functioning. And the worst part is that you're starting to enjoy the pain. The ritual of bleeding becomes intoxicating, and you find yourself using the weapon, even when there's no danger, just to feel that rush of self-inflicted pain. The cursed reality was even more horrifying than the concept. The blood had to be fresh, less than 5 minutes old, or the mechanism would jam. This meant that in a gunfight, the shooter would have to repeatedly stab themselves with the needle to keep the weapon functional. The psychological effect of inflicting pain on yourself to inflict pain on others was devastating. But the true curse was in the weapon's addiction. The rifle seemed to develop a hunger for blood that grew over time. Users reported that the weapon would require more and more blood to function, starting with 1 ounce per shot and gradually demanding 2 ounces, then 3. The needle mechanism would become less precise, requiring deeper and deeper wounds. And just when you think we've reached the depths of cursed weaponry, our next creation literally opened doorways to hell. Number 4, the Hellgate Revolver, Portal to Damnation. This weapon didn't just kill people, it supposedly opened rifts in reality itself. The Hellgate Revolver was created by an inventor who claimed he had discovered a way to harness supernatural forces to make his bullets more deadly. What he actually created was a weapon that seemed to tear holes in the fabric of existence. The revolver appeared normal except for strange symbols carved into the cylinder and barrel, symbols that hurt to look at directly and seemed to shift and change when observed. The bullets were made from a metal that was always cold to the touch, no matter how hot the weather, and they left wounds that never properly healed. Picture the first time this cursed weapon was fired. The bullet didn't just leave the barrel, it seemed to tear a hole in the air itself. Witnesses reported seeing darkness deeper than night in the weapon's wake, and hearing sounds that came from no earthly source. Screams, wails, and whispers in languages that predated human speech. But the true curse wasn't what the weapon did to its targets. It was what it did to reality around its user. People who carried Hellgate revolvers reported that shadows moved independently, that they could see things in their peripheral vision that vanished when looked at directly, and that they could hear voices calling their names from empty rooms. The weapon seemed to attract supernatural attention. Users would find themselves plagued by unexplained phenomena, objects moving on their own, sudden temperature drops, and the constant feeling of being watched by invisible eyes. Most disturbing of all, the Hellgate Revolver seemed to corrupt other weapons around it. Shooters would report that their backup guns would misfire, jam, or even discharge on their own when stored near the cursed revolver. It was as if the weapon's evil influence spread to contaminate everything in its vicinity. The few documented users of Hellgate revolvers all met mysterious ends. Found dead, with looks of absolute terror on their faces, often in locked rooms with no signs of struggle. Their bodies showed wounds that couldn't have been made by any earthly weapon, and in several cases, witnesses reported seeing dark figures standing over the corpses before vanishing into thin air. That one caught us off guard too. What do you think? Was this weapon misunderstood or just plain overhyped? Drop your take in the comments. We read everyone, and we might even feature your insight in the next video. And hey, if you're loving this deep dive into frontier firepower, hit subscribe and join a community that's obsessed with the raw, unfiltered truth of the Wild West. But even supernatural evil seems almost tame compared to our next weapon, which was cursed by its own mechanical impossibility. Number 3, the Paradox Pistol, the Time Destroyer. Imagine a weapon so fundamentally wrong in its design that it violated the laws of physics themselves. The Paradox Pistol was the result of an inventor's attempt to create a gun that could fire bullets faster than the speed of sound. Not just faster, but impossibly faster, breaking the barriers of reality itself. The weapon looked deceptively simple. A single-shot pistol with an unusually long barrel and a firing mechanism covered in gauges, springs, and clockwork components that ticked and whirred constantly. But this cursed device was designed to compress time itself, firing bullets that would arrive at their target before they had actually left the barrel. Picture this impossible scenario. A gunfighter draws his Paradox pistol and aims at his opponent. He pulls the trigger, but instead of a normal sequence of events, reality becomes twisted. The bullet impact occurs first. The target staggers backwards, blood appearing on their chest. Only then does the pistol fire, the sound of the gunshot echoing after the bullet has already struck. The cursed reality was that using this weapon created temporal fractures that grew larger with each shot. Users would experience time skips, moments where they would suddenly find themselves somewhere else, with no memory of how they got there. They would age rapidly during these episodes, sometimes gaining years of wear in minutes. But the true horror was what happened to the weapon's targets. Those shot by the Paradox pistol didn't just die, they experienced their death before it happened, living through their final moments over and over in an endless loop of terror and pain. Witnesses reported seeing victims screaming about wounds that hadn't appeared yet, begging for mercy from attacks that were still in the future. The most terrifying aspect was that the weapon seemed to be erasing its users from history itself. People who carried Paradox pistols would gradually be forgotten by friends and family, as if their existence was being slowly edited out of reality. And speaking of lost souls, our next weapon was cursed to steal the very essence of life itself. Number 2, the Life Drain Derringer, the Soul Siphon. This tiny pistol was the most insidious weapon on our list. Not because of its size, but because it fed on the life force of everyone around it, including its owner. The Life Drain Derringer was created by an inventor obsessed with creating the perfect assassination weapon, something that could kill silently and leave no trace. The weapon appeared to be an elegant pocket derringer, small enough to hide in a lady's purse, but crafted from a metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The grip was always cold, even in blazing desert heat, and touching it left users feeling inexplicably tired and weak. Picture this cursed weapon in action. An assassin pulls out the Life Drain Derringer in a crowded saloon. As they aim, everyone within 20 feet begins to feel dizzy and weak. The weapon doesn't need gunpowder. It draws energy from the living people around it, using their life force to propel its deadly bullet. The bullet itself was made from the same light-absorbing metal as the gun, and it didn't kill through physical trauma. Instead, it would pass through the victim's body like a ghost, stealing their life essence and leaving them as an empty shell, technically alive, but with no spark of consciousness or soul remaining. But here's where the curse became truly diabolical. The weapon was addictive to use. Each time it drained life force, some of that energy flowed back into the shooter, making them feel temporarily stronger, younger, more alive. Users would find themselves manufacturing excuses to use the weapon, not for self-defense, but for the intoxicating rush of stolen life energy. The addiction always led to the user's destruction. The Life Drain Derringer would begin to feed on its owner between uses, slowly sipping away their life force like a vampire. Users would age rapidly, their hair turning white, their skin becoming paper-thin and translucent. They would become obsessed with finding victims, needing fresh life energy to replace what the weapon constantly stole from them. And now, we come to the most cursed weapon of all, a creation so evil that it was said to be forged by the devil himself. Number 1. The Devil's Compact Rifle. The ultimate cursed weapon. At the top of our list stands the most cursed weapon ever created in the Wild West. A rifle that didn't just kill its targets, but claimed the souls of everyone it touched. The Devil's Compact Rifle was supposedly created when a desperate gunsmith made a literal deal with the devil to create the perfect weapon. This wasn't just folklore. The rifle was real, documented, and left a trail of damnation across the frontier. It appeared to be a magnificent lever-action rifle with intricate engravings that seemed to move and shift in the light. But looking closely at those engravings revealed disturbing images, scenes of torture, damnation, and supernatural evil that told the story of every soul the weapon had claimed. Picture the weapon's curse in action. Anyone who touched the Devil's Compact Rifle would immediately feel its evil influence. Their reflection would begin to change, showing not their current appearance, but their face twisted with evil, their eyes black as midnight, their expression cruel and heartless. The weapon didn't just corrupt its users, it transformed them into instruments of evil. The rifle never missed its target, but its bullets carried more than death. They carried damnation. Those killed by the Devil's Compact Rifle were said to be denied entry to heaven, their souls trapped forever in the weapon itself. And with each soul it claimed, the rifle became more powerful, more evil, and more impossible to resist. Users of the weapon found themselves compelled to commit increasingly evil acts. They would murder innocent people for the sheer pleasure of feeding souls to their cursed rifle. They would betray friends, destroy families, and spread suffering wherever they went. The weapon's influence was so strong that even the most moral person would become a monster within days of touching it. Thanks for riding with us through the deadliest weapons ever carried across the American frontier. If this video hit the mark for you, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves real history over Hollywood fantasy. We've got more brutal hidden stories coming soon, so subscribe, ring the bell, and saddle up for the next wild ride.